Oh, hang on. Oh.
Now we all know, yes.
Evening, Colin, anyway.
Sorry, I'm in, but we've got our sister, or my sister-in-law, Joan's sister, with us today. And I've just snitched away from the dinner.
It went on rather, did it, the dinner?
I'm very happy.
You have a smile on your face.
I'm definitely in the right place.
Yeah. You prefer not to travel, would you?
Well, it's exciting time of her life, thinking of a move from Bristol down to the south coast.
Oh, goodness.
Sorry, can I just ask, Jim, you're the host. Could I ask you to make me co-host so I can share my screen because we have slides?
No problem at all. Let me just find you in here. There you are.
Super, that will work. But I won't do it now. I'll wait until you want to start.
Well, I make it pretty much 7:30. We might have a few people just joining still. Let me just have a look and see if there's anyone that looks like they're joining.
Oh, Gordon's away.
Gordon, I'm Gordon for one night only, so apologies to Morag for impersonating your dad. But I won't do a proper impersonation, like I said, because that would be inappropriate. But anyway, I'm Gordon for tonight, so I'm co-hosting together with Penny, Diana and Amanda. Welcome to you all. What I will do first of all, though, is I will mute everyone so that Peter Blaskus can then say a few words, and then I'll hand over to Penny and Diana and Amanda for the session. So, Peter, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Good evening again. I apologise, I haven't written a specific few words for tonight, so it's what I call a stock item, but quite a good one, I think. Life is for living. Love is for giving. Friends are for caring. Food is for sharing. For life, love, good friends and good food, we give our thanks.
Excellent. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much. Hear, hear. So, as I mentioned, I'd like to welcome Penny Carey, Diana Kirsch and Amanda Thurston. Perhaps you'd like to introduce yourselves in a moment, but the subject matter for today is, can university law schools bridge the access to justice gap? An exploration of practical learning and its community benefits from a contemporary university perspective. So without further ado, I'll stop talking now and I'll hand over to Penny, Diana and Amanda. And thank you very much for coming.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Jim, impersonating Gordon. And I'm just going to, oh, look, that looks very exciting. Diana, if you'd like, that's wonderful. And could you put it into, thank you, that's fantastic. So thank you so much for inviting us to come and speak to you this evening. We're delighted to be able to do so through the portal of Zoom. As Jim says, I'm Penny Carey. I have the pleasure and privilege of being Dean of Hertfordshire Law School, and you can see our fabulous law school at the university there in front of you. And I'm joined this evening by two wonderful colleagues. I've got many wonderful colleagues who work with me, but I'm particularly joined tonight by Diana Kirsch, who's our Associate Dean for Enterprise, but is also the Director of Pro Bono Activities, and was formerly a solicitor, as indeed was I. Well, we still are solicitors, we just don't practice. And the third member tonight is Amanda Thurston, who is the Director of Hertfordshire Law Clinic and is also a solicitor, but in the area of family law. So I would particularly like to thank the Stork Valley Rotary Club for giving us the opportunity to speak. I've been fascinated to watch a really interesting and broad range of lectures that you've hosted. We hope that ours will similarly shine a light on an area of the university's community work that you might not be familiar with. Could I have the next slide, please? Oh, I'm Chris Whitty. Thank you. In case you don't know that much about the law school, we've been around for more than 40 years. First awarding a BA honours, I think it was back then, in legal studies in the late 1970s, but we've now grown to what would be described as a full service law school, offering a full range of undergraduate law, professional postgraduate law, and also research degrees in law, and supplemented by delivery of criminology about 5 years ago. And we have now grown from a handful of students back in the late 70s to now more than 1,500 scholars. And our growth has been matched by the university's growth. And as an anchor institution, we now have more than 25,000 students from more than 80 different countries. Thank you. Next slide. One of the outstanding things, aside from our beautiful facilities and obviously our full replica Crown Court, and I hope we'll have a picture to show you, has been the growth of the diversity of students that we have. The majority now are first in family to go to university, and they come from a very broad ethnic mix, as you can see on the slide. But despite the challenges, socially and economically, that they face, many go on to absolutely outstanding graduate careers, and they make a positive difference both in local communities, but also nationally. For example, Dr. Grace Sononiwu, CBE, the law clinic patron, and also a member of the university's board of governors, is an early alumnus, and she's now Director of Legal Services for the Crown Prosecution Service nationally. And we're also extremely proud to count the current High Sheriff of Hertfordshire, Lionel Wallace, who I see is here tonight, as a law school alumnus too. So our graduate success is absolute testament to the considerable hard work by academic staff to support our students with their intellectual growth and skill set development. And this mirrors the current university strategic plan, which has got 3 key themes. They are community, opportunity, and flexibility. And as the anchor institution for Hertfordshire, it is the wonderful work that's being done through our award-winning law clinic and through pro bono activities, often delivered in partnership with other charitable organisations, that provides both experiential learning opportunities for our students, but is also supporting the broad community of Hertfordshire through the wide range of legal services that they offer. And we're very grateful to you for allowing us to share that work with you this evening. And therefore I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to hand over now, I think, to Amanda first, to start to tell you a little bit more about the access to justice gap before going on to talk about the clinic.
Thank you, Penny. So just to give you a bit of background detail, many of you may be aware that the government made some major cuts to public funding, what we all know as legal aid, back in 2012, which came into effect in 2013. They cut, you'll see some of the figures there, huge amounts of monies off the legal aid bill, which mainly affected areas of family law, social welfare, and housing in particular. Now, we often know that budgets have to be cut, and some people felt very strongly that these cuts would mean that with less money freely available to litigants, there would hopefully be less litigation, and therefore the court service would be less burdened, shall we say, by possibly sometimes unnecessary cases. Unfortunately, as a family practitioner of too many years, I'd hate to tell you about, that wasn't what happened. What actually happened, particularly in the area of family law, was that people still needed to have disputes resolved, and so they fell either into debt in using credit cards to get legal advice, or they went to the bank of mum and dad, or they became litigants in person. And actually the huge increase in the number of litigants in person, particularly in family law, is one of the problems that the judicial system is now facing. Whilst they may have saved money in legal aid, they now have to spend far more money in other professionals and in their court service, with the judiciary, the court staff, having to try and deal with these people who've got no idea how to fill forms in, whether to fill the right form in, how to deal with matters when they attend court, what to do with court orders, and the actual hearings themselves often being delayed and taking longer than they used to. Alongside these cuts in public funding, we also saw a fall in the number of law centres, which would historically be where people who needed free legal advice would go to. You think of people like Citizens Advice, and often they were charitable law centres. And in particular in Hertfordshire, we have real issues there. Other than Citizen Advice, there's very few places that anyone could go to. And this is where universities, not just us in Hertfordshire, but actually across the country, universities have started to bridge the gap and have their own law clinics and law centres, often in partnership with other charities or other organisations, to try and help provide some free legal advice. So our Hertfordshire Law Clinic was opened in October 2019, so it's now only 18 months old. And what we were trying to do when we started, and Penny touched on this in some of the, the key areas that the university's really important strategic plans, what it wants to focus on, is not only providing an authentic and relevant and real experience for the students so they can actually deal with real clients and real cases and real lawyers, but actually to give something back to the local community, to actually provide some free legal assistance in areas of law, which actually we can see that there is an area of need within Hertfordshire. And so this is how we've built up the areas, including family, employment, housing, and over the months we've expanded to include things like IP and commercial and contract and consumer law. During the clinic, the students obviously have a lot of training, but they're still not allowed to actually give legal advice directly to the clients. I think our insurers would have a fit about that. So instead, they are very closely supervised by internal members of staff who are still solicitors within the law school at the university, but also external lawyers from the local community, which I'm going to refer to a bit later on. Now, the law clinic was only 6 months old in March last year, when obviously many of you will now remember we had a bit of a problem when we at the university were given, I think possibly 24, maybe 48 hours notice that the campus needed to close down and we all needed to go home. Now, a lot of law clinics and particularly university law clinics struggled with this whole concept of how to move online so quickly and actually close down for a lengthy period of time in that first national lockdown. We made the decision to just actually go for it, find some way of moving it online virtually, and within 24 hours had our very first Zoom account. We'd never even heard of Zoom back then, all those months ago, and very smoothly seemed to manage to move everything online, and we've kept it entirely online ever since. There have been occasions, particularly last September and again now in this year, when we have been allowed to go back on campus to teach, but actually for the continuity for the clients and for the external lawyers who volunteer for the clinic, we felt it was easier just to keep it all online. And actually these online virtual appointments have worked really well on a number of different levels. These stats here is just to give you some flavour of how successful the clinic's been. I have to say that with actually very little marketing whatsoever, we have managed to get a huge number of clients through our doors, or through our screens, should I say, to come and see us. And you will see that by far the biggest clinic we have is the family law clinic. The number of clients we've seen there far outweigh all of the other clients all the other clinics put together. And as I said, for my many years practicing as a family lawyer, I was not surprised whatsoever, because it is an area of law where often you just simply don't get any choice as to whether or not you want to litigate about something. If you're separating or divorcing and there's issues about finances, about children, about where people are going to live, they have to be resolved. And normally emotions are far too high at the time for the parties to be expected to try and deal with those between themselves. And here, as I mentioned before, just a few of the local law firms we wanted to highlight to say thank you, as we often do to them, because without their help, we really couldn't do this law clinic. We have fabulous students who volunteer their time, fabulous members of staff who go above and beyond their teaching requirements to help out with the supervision of the law clinic. But actually, we are very lucky to have a number of lawyers from local law firms who now, by the power of Zoom, can come and supervise the students. And it's great because they are offering their time pro bono, and a lot of law firms recognise in this day and age that they need to do some pro bono work, unfortunately, to help with the whole issues of access to justice. But also for the students, it's a great opportunity because they're getting to see day-to-day lawyers in practice, and also giving them a chance to network when it comes to the the nitty difficulties of trying to get that job, to get that foot in the door, to try and get some work placements or work experience.
Thank you, Amanda. So although the service we provide is completely free of charge to our clients, obviously we want to ensure that we provide the best possible service. So we always collect feedback from clients. And I've given you a few examples there just to give you a flavour of it, but it's overwhelmingly positive. They're always very grateful that we're giving them free advice and very complimentary about our students. So you can see some nice comments there about what great listeners they are. So as well as what was our on-campus clinic, which is now our online clinic, we also launched a satellite clinic at Future Living in Hertford, which is a domestic abuse charity. So we started off with fortnightly appointments, and we quickly realised that we couldn't keep up with demand. So we turned it into a weekly clinic, and those appointments were initially in Future Living's premises in Hertford, but obviously that one's moved online as well. So it's been a huge success. Our students who take part in this clinic have to do some additional training in domestic abuse awareness, and also because they're dealing with vulnerable people, they have criminal records checks. We had also planned to launch a family law clinic at HMP The Mount, our local prison, providing family law advice to prisoners. We were literally 2 weeks from launch, I think March last year, and unfortunately that's sort of temporarily on hold because obviously you can't do Zoom appointments in a prison because they're not allowed to have the internet, and at the moment there are restrictions on who can go in, so at the moment it's only really essential visitors, but hopefully we can launch that soon. We've also launched an LGBT clinic this year, and that's in collaboration with TOCO, which is a youth charity in Luton. And we also consulted with our LGBT student and staff networks and provided additional training for students just to make sure that they were, sensitive to the issues and aware of the correct terminology, for example, the pronouns that they should use if they were talking to someone who identified as trans or non-binary. And we're covering similar areas of law, so family, housing, employment, but obviously targeted to the LGBT community. So over 200 students have volunteered since our launch. And again, we collect feedback from them, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. So I've given you some examples there. So you can see that our students really value the chance to get hands-on experience. They like being given the responsibility of talking to clients. And so, yeah, overwhelmingly positive. And what we're hoping to do is track students, so see the impact of taking part in pro bono on graduate outcomes. We also have a street law project, and street law is a legal education project, and it's aimed at improving access to justice by demystifying the law. So our students go into schools and colleges and deliver interactive workshops on topics that affect the everyday lives of the audience. So for example, you can see two of my students there in the corner delivering a stop and search workshop, which was to sixth formers at school in North London, and we've moved online. So you can see one of my other students doing a session for LGBT History Month. And it's a great opportunity for our students to build their confidence and particularly their presentation skills, and they get to work in teams and find out about areas of law that they might not otherwise know about. And again, we collect feedback from our street law audience, and it's overwhelmingly positive. So this is feedback from a workshop we did in Oaklands College, and it was around employment law rights for young people. And so we encourage our students to make the sessions really engaging, so they have quizzes and role plays, so it's not just our students talking at the audience, they try and really sort of interact with them. Okay, I'm handing over to Amanda again.
Sorry, yes, back to me again for a few more of our projects. So one of the ones I was particularly interested in was support at court, because it involved family law court matters. So again, I mentioned before that the increasing number of litigants in person in family cases, because a lot of the times they have no choice, that the matters need to be brought before the court system. And in children cases, it is particularly emotional, and it's a particularly big issue that matters can be delayed, and the court staff and judiciary find it very hard to try and move cases along when they have members of the public acting in person without any legal advice or representation. And so we worked in partnership with a local judiciary judiciary at Watford and Hertford Family Courts to set up a project where our law students who are already involved in the clinic could have special extra training to understand how they can give support to litigants in person. Again, clearly they can't give legal advice, but actually there's a lot more to it than that. They need to be able to give practical and emotional support. Simply being in the waiting room and sitting next to someone to keep them calm whilst they're waiting to go before the judge or the magistrates, helping them to get their paperwork in the right order, just being told how they should address the judge or the magistrate. Things again have got slightly more complicated because within a couple of weeks of us trying this out, when it went brilliantly well, the courts had to close down and they have not yet reopened. And with hearings by telephone, it was felt that it was going to be too complicated trying to get extra people on those telephone calls. And so instead we have Zoom appointments to support people a day or two before their court hearing. So again, just to make sure they're prepared, they've got their papers in order, they've calmed down a bit, and they know what to expect during these telephone hearings. And again, it's not just providing the help to that actual litigant, that party themselves. It means the whole case can hopefully run more smoothly, which can impact on the other party, hopefully the children concerned, and also the other professional organisations like the judiciary, the court welfare service. So it's a knock-on effect to hopefully make the whole system better for everybody. Another really good project we had running for the first time this year was our Stevenage Welfare Benefits Appeals project, where we worked in conjunction with Stevenage Citizen Advice. We managed to get a good bit of funding from the big lottery funding to actually get a specialist lawyer to work with Citizen Advice in Stevenage and to train our law students so that they knew how to give specialist advice to these litigants in person who were not receiving the benefits they were entitled to and had no idea really how to find their way around the appeal process. So they were helping them with form filling and actually even getting the chance to represent sometimes. And you'll see from the figures of there, the large significant sums that they managed to achieve just in the initial 6-month pilot. And these are sums that obviously look big anyway, but actually to people who are surviving on state benefits are really, really important lifelines for them. And what we're currently trying to do is to get another lot of funding so that we can continue the project in the next academic year. Another big name here, Shelter, you will hopefully all have heard of that as a national charity that helps those facing homelessness. They have their own solicitors who work for the charity and go into the courts to try and help people who have got housing situations and potentially are facing being repossessed or made homeless. And the problem is that they are normally overwhelmed, absolutely, as you can imagine, by, again, litigants in person. So what our students do are trained to go along with the lawyer to do the triaging, to help fill the forms and do the admin side of things, and again, provide some more extra support. And this just means that the actual trained lawyer can focus their time, their very valuable time, on actually giving the advice and the representation. And if you can see there, we've got some really lovely feedback from Ruth Camp, one of the duty solicitors who works for Shelter. And while we've given you a sort of a flavour of lots of the projects, not all of them, but a lot of the projects that we've been doing over the last 18 months, what we wanted you to also know that we haven't rested on our laurels at all. Whilst we've seen some big successes, actually we want to do more. We know that obviously the students always want to have new adventures, new exciting things to look forward to. And we as a university want to find new ways of communicating with all the local organisations and charities, and again, trying to find a way of giving something back to the local community. And so one of the new projects we're looking at the moment is working with Centrepoint, the national charity that helps young people facing homeless, but often other issues as well. And so we're hoping to bring an immigration clinic in collaboration with Duncan Lewis, who are a specialist law firm who deal with immigration and asylum claims. We also want to get some of our students to do some street law information packs for Centrepoint's website. And again, from a sort of peer-to-peer level, it's the same sort of generation and age gap, so they can hopefully do them in an interactive and an interesting way that the clients at Centrepoint will really appreciate and be able to take on board the information that's being given to them and feel empowered by it. And lastly, an access to justice support scheme, which is really aimed to look at the criminal justice system, where often the youngsters who Centrepoint are helping could be victims of crime, could have been witnesses, may be involved in some minor offences themselves, or at least have been suggested, maybe stopped and searched or arrested. And a lot of them have got no idea who to approach and where to get help from. And Centrepoint do a lot of useful things as a charity, but they can't be specialists in all areas. So again, it's another scheme that we hope that we will be able to help their young people. And last but by no means least, one of the most exciting new projects, which has been on hold for a long time now, because it was supposed to go live in around probably March 2020, unfortunately, is our Hertfordshire Community Mobile Advice Clinic, or as Penny and I like to call it, the Justice Bus. Now, unfortunately, I had envisaged a big double-decker bus emblazoned with University of Hertfordshire logos on the side of it. I have got to scale down my vision slightly, but the idea is to take some students out to local rural areas within the county to help those who cannot access justice, either because of public transport links, maybe they just don't realize that the issue they've got actually is one they need legal help with and can get legal help with. So again, to have things like a pop-up legal advice clinic, maybe to do some small street law presentations on relevant areas depending on the sort of generation and clientele that we get attending, and also to work in conjunction with other organisations, so maybe the police, the fire service, also Heart's Domestic Abuse Helpline and the Community Development Action Group in Hertfordshire, to really try and put out there the extra help that we can offer. And at the moment, we're looking to start our pilot in, fingers crossed, autumn of this year. And we're looking to start in the north and east of the county and to set up in local town halls and village halls and to work with the local communities there. And as I said, the other charities and organisations to try and reach out to as many people as we can. And it's a really exciting new project for us.
Thank you, Amanda. So we were really delighted to be recognised by LawWorks. So LawWorks are the umbrella organisation who look after pro bono carried out by solicitors in England and Wales. And they have an annual student pro bono awards with the Attorney General. And you can see a picture of my student Sartaz there. So last year, he won the award for best contribution by an individual, which was fantastic. We were enormously proud of him. And also our law clinic won the award for best new pro bono activity, which was wonderful. And then this year, the whole law school's been highly commended in the category of best contribution by law school for the different pro bono projects that we've done. So we were absolutely thrilled. So we think there are huge benefits to our students from taking part in pro bono. It's a fantastic opportunity for them to build work experience, enhance their CVs, particularly at the moment when we know it's really hard for them to find work experience. It's also great for networking. So as Penny mentioned, many of our students are from widening access backgrounds. You know, they won't have people in their family who are lawyers, they won't know lawyers. And so because we work with local firms, it's their chance to work alongside lawyers and build their professional network. It also helps build their confidence and their transferable skills. And some of you might have heard of the new super exam, which is the new route to qualifying as a solicitor, which is coming in September. And so under that route, students who work in the law clinic may be able to count their work experience towards qualifying. So they now have to do 2 years qualifying work experience. We also now have modules. So students who take part in the clinic can do a clinical legal education module, and it actually counts towards their final degree. So I thought it'd be useful to sort of set out the wider context. And so I've included some data from the most recent LawWorks Law School survey from 2020. And you can see that 98% of the respondents to that survey actually offer some kind of pro bono opportunity, which means there were over 3,000 students across 78 law schools taking part in pro bono, which is a huge figure. Of those schools, 75% are offering legal advice, and a whopping 90% have seen demand increase in the last year, which I suppose, given the situation, is not that surprising. So trying to reach a conclusion. So obviously the question we asked is, could university law clinics help bridge the access to justice gap? And I don't really have an answer. I mean, clearly, you know, we are doing everything we can to try and address the issue of unmet legal need, as are many other universities across the country. But there is an argument that it's not enough. So I've included a couple of quotes there. So Stephanie Boyce is the current Law Society president, and she was actually at the Law Work Students Awards, and that's where I took the quote from. So she says that pro bono should not be a substitute for a proper system of publicly funded legal services. And I've also included a quote from Lady Hale, who she's now retired, but she was the president of the Supreme Court, and she's spoken a lot about problems, particularly with cuts to family legal aid and the difficulty with litigants in person. So as you've heard, we've got lots of good projects running at the moment. We also have lots of ideas for new projects. So we're hoping to expand so that we can help even more people in the coming years. And so I'm going to hand over now to Penny, who's going to talk about how we hope that maybe you can get involved.
Thank you very much, Diana. So I hope that this rather kind of whistle-stop tour this evening has given you a flavour of how we're providing opportunities for our students, but also supporting the broader community as well. And whilst the access to justice gap has been featured throughout as an unfortunate decline in accessibility of legal services for many members of the public, I'm sure you'll agree that the university is doing some wonderful work through its law clinic to bridge that gap. And as we know, there is a long tradition of community justice in this country, exemplified by the magistracy, who hear almost 95% of cases. And I think it's worth flagging up that we are working in partnership with the High Sheriff to support the broadening of age and diversity for the important work that they do as well. But as ever, we can only expand and support more clients through the generous support of those able to assist. And as Diana said, there are many ways to get involved, and we've indicated some on the slide. So it could be active support of students, providing legal advice if you're able to, and the important area of supporting our ongoing fundraising activities. But Diana, Amanda, and myself would be extremely delighted to hear from any of you or any contacts that you've got regarding support or assistance. But thank you so much again. And I think all three of us would be very happy to answer any questions. So Diana, do you want to perhaps stop sharing the slides and then we can see, and I'll hand back to you, Jim, I think.
Yeah, thanks very much. And thank you all very much for a fascinating talk, really. I never realized that any of this was going on. So I think I'm definitely not alone in that, but you know, it's great to hear, and it's fantastic that there's all of this actually going on. So I noticed that Alistair has his hand raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself, Alistair, and then go ahead.
Thanks very much indeed, Jim. I'm on this call because I'm a good friend of Gordon Morrison, who you all know. And it's not a setup call because I'm the chairman of LawWorks, the charity that Diana and Amanda and Penny mentioned earlier. We run the infrastructure for a lot of law clinics across the country, both those run by universities and law schools and run by groups of lawyers around the country. Half of our clinics are supported by law schools, and it's an amazing effort that they put in to help people who just don't have the money to pay for lawyers. What I wanted to say was the university has been awarded, has received awards in the last couple of years, so richly deserved, after not being long in the game, as it were, of running law clinics. And last year, as I think Diana was saying, excuse me, you won the award for the best pro bono activity, and Sarta's Billing won the best individual award. It's very humbling for old lawyers like myself to see how much work these young people put into helping individuals who don't have the money to afford a lawyer. They're working hard to pass exams. Many of them are doing jobs on the side to keep the money coming in, etc. And it's one of the best days as chair of LawWorks that I have in the year, when I meet all these young people either virtually or in better times down in the Houses of Parliament to hear what they're doing. So I'm hugely pleased to see the university talking about the fantastic work they do. I hope that you continue with it, because if you catch a young person at university with the bug of doing pro bono work for people without money who need law advice, then even though they become great judges or great city lawyers or great barristers or working in the local community doing family law, they'll continue to do pro bono and continue to contribute to their own local communities. So well done, Penny, Diana, and Amanda. And I hope that underlines to some extent the fantastic effort the faculty has put in. You really deserve all the praise you can get.
Thank you, Alistair. I think you can tell from our very broad smiles that how pleased we are, how successful the clinic has been. I think beyond my wildest dreams, to be absolutely honest, facilitated not just by Diana and Amanda, but a whole tribe of people helping behind the scenes, and obviously all of the students. And I think what this pandemic has taught us is that it is possible to adjust and to find new ways of working. And we thought the mobile clinic, which would be, we still want to set up, was the way to reach people in sort of inaccessible areas, more rural areas. But of course we realized that we can do so much through Zoom as well. So I think we will continue with that, trying to use technology to enhance our ability to support more people. And as Amanda particularly told you, we're moving into even greater areas of complexity, but also unmet need. So we're really thrilled. And it's interesting to hear that Jim say that you weren't really aware of all this going on. I've always said we hide our bushel under a bushel. And I think it's about time that we need to get those bushels and lights out into the broader community. So anything you can do, and if you know of any people who you think might benefit from street law, any youth groups or other charitable organizations that you would like to put us in touch with, we'd be so thrilled to work with them. And Sarah Beasley's on this call, I can see as well. And when Sarah was High Sheriff, we had some wonderful chats, and Sarah brought us into contact with so many people, and now Lionel is doing the same. And as I really emphasize the anchor institution aspect, because I feel very strongly the commitment that we owe as a university to the county in which we sit. And I feel that very strongly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alistair, lovely to have you. Thanks for coming along. Colin, George, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you very much for the talk. I was involved with the Legal Aid Board a couple of decades ago, at a time when the government was really starting to crack down on the costs of legal aid, and very involved in the early days of franchising and so on, franchising of solicitors, and also multi-actions. So I'm interested in both areas, but I'm really interested in just how, I mean, the government squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, different governments, different parties. And I wondered just how currently the Ministry for Justice is actually seeing the developments that the law schools have picked up. And clearly there's a temptation, isn't there, always, of more voluntary activities, a bit like the food bank, which Jim's very much involved in. The more that voluntary activity builds, the less government seems to take an interest. And I just wondered how the current stage of the thinking was, and whether there's any integration between, or even ideas of integration between what you're able to do and what the government really has traditionally set out to do and provide.
Yes, no, I think that's really interesting. I don't know, Diana or Amanda, I've talked a lot. Do you want to say something? I mean, I think we probably would say that the space we occupy now might previously have been occupied by law centres. Certainly back in the day when I was a law student, 64 million years ago, supporting and volunteering with the law centre was the thing that you did, but there are now so few law centres that I think law schools have moved into that space, and we coordinate our activities across sharing ideas and knowledge. And as Alistair said, LawWorks is, you know, invaluable for helping law schools to get set up. We couldn't have really done it without them and without their support. But I do think that there is a worrying decline in terms of attention potentially being paid from the ministry to this. And I can't see any indication at the moment, I don't know if Diana and Amanda want to come in, that suggests anything different. And the members of the judiciary that we work with as well. So we actually have the former resident judge of St Albans Crown Court, His Honour Judge Andrew Bright, is now a member of staff. Now he's retired in the university. He teaches advocacy and he supports the students. And I think he would be very vocal in saying to you about the sort of lack of financial support for the courts. And so we see this diminution across the whole piece. But I'll stop talking. I don't know, Diana or Amanda, if you want to add anything.
Well, I can only really add it from a sort of family law side of things, because up until literally 6 months ago, I was still splitting my time between university teaching and actually working in a local law firm as a family practitioner. And I actually used to be a franchise supervisor back in the day in London when I still did legal aid work, much to the horror of the other partners in the law firm who couldn't understand why I would do any work for such paltry hourly rates. But I fought against them for a long while. But actually, the problem is that even when the major cuts came in 2012, 2013, there was still legal aid public funding available. But even if a client could be eligible and could jump through all the hurdles to actually say, okay, I can get legal aid, trying to find a lawyer who would actually be prepared to do the work because of the terrible hourly rates and the overburdened administration. You then needed to have contracts rather than franchises, and it just got so complicated that most firms who used to do legal aid gave it up. Because they just couldn't financially carry on doing it. So that was a real shame. And it ended up really, but it seemed to be that the government's answer was, well, whatever bit of legal aid public funding money we're going to have available or provide, we'll give it to the law centres and hope that they can use it in a better way. But I don't think they really, I mean, I don't feel that they really have a proper regular conversations and interactions with at least the university law clinics at the very least, to really appreciate and understand what we are all doing. And maybe that's possibly something that we need to be doing to sort of really foisting ourselves on them a lot more, to be saying, you know, do you realize this is what we're doing? And actually, we're not just doing it for our students, we're doing it because we know there's a need. And what are you going to do to help support us? The problem is that I know from practice that the court system is in an untenable state. I mean, it can't cope. The reason that in family law, mediation was brought in a few years ago, and it's virtually compulsory to try mediation out now before you can issue most proceedings in family law. And the reason that was brought in was not because they suddenly wanted to provide lots of extra work for mediators because they felt nice about it, it's because they didn't want people going to court. And it's a lovely idea to use mediation, to use amicable means to not have people litigate in court. I get it, but actually it doesn't work for everybody, and you can't force people to mediate if they don't want to, aren't able to, if there's an imbalance of power. So unfortunately, I don't think that, well, I personally don't have an easy answer to that because I don't think there is one.
Is there any lobby within Parliament to actually resolve some of the issues that you've just run through?
I mean, there are pockets of the legal profession, particularly in areas like crime and family, are ongoing lobbying and ongoing projects to try and get more funding. But the problem we've got is it's a losing battle. Every single section of government has not got enough money. And obviously the last year has just made things 10 times worse anyway. But, you know, the problem you've got is when you're lobbying to say, can we have more money to give to lawyers, the general public turn around and say, hang on a minute, we've been told by the media for years that they're fat cat lawyers. Why on earth would we want to give them more? We're up against a fighting battle. I mean, it's probably, I think it's got, unfortunately, if you ask the public at large, public funding legal aid has got a very low priority.
Alistair, would you like to chip in at this point?
Yes, sorry, Diane, if you wanted to go first.
Oh, that's okay. No, go on, Alistair.
Just a couple of points. At Law Works, because we are so heavily involved in pro bono, we're acutely aware of the point you made about not putting the government's feet to the fire. And our mantra is very much that pro bono should not be a substitute for a properly funded legal aid program. Personally, I take the view that it's a bit like the Good Samaritan. The government are not going to provide money in the short term, and therefore young people at the university and older lawyers can't just stand by and say, well, if the government are not paying for it, we're not going to help. You just take the rough end. So that's why I think a lot of lawyers across the board are happy to provide pro bono. I think over the last, since the Second World War, I think there've been something like 30 consultations on how best to fund legal aid, and none of them has really come up with a solution. So I don't think a solution will come along anytime soon. But I think there are two reasons for optimism. We deal quite a lot with the Ministry of Justice, and Robert Buckland, you can like him for some reasons and not for other reasons. He's a pretty strong voice now with the Treasury, unlike quite a number of his predecessors. So I think there's a bit of cause for optimism that he'll maybe catch the eye of the Chancellor to some extent. The second thing is the judiciary are really fed up of litigants in person. It's absolutely jamming up the courts. And the judges up to the Court of Appeal, they're unbelievably good at holding the hand of the litigant in person to take them through their rights and help them. And it just makes the court system not work many days of the week. And the Court of Appeal judges are asking for lawyers from the great firms in the city to come along at 9 o'clock in the morning to go through the paper bags with the notes, etc., that the litigant in person has. So it's just not working, as Amanda was saying. But the last point I would mention as a cause for optimism, I think, is that the Ministry of Justice now recognises that early intervention by a lawyer in someone's problem is going to save the government money. So if you have some person, a typical client for your law clinic, who's about to be thrown out of their house because they haven't said, I've run out of money, so can't pay my rent, a lawyer's letter or a clinic young person's letter might just make the local authority or the landlord say, oh, I understand now, we'll not chuck you out this week. But if you chuck that person out, they might start having mental problems. They might start having to challenge the local authority to provide a home for their kids as well as themselves, etc. And the problems multiply and get worse if they're not nipped in the bud early. And the Ministry of Justice, I think, is beginning to see that now. And so I hope that they'll pump a little bit of money in a much more focused way at early intervention in legal problems and see the benefit of that and see the savings, the knock-on savings in the National Health Service and visits to GPs and all the other stresses and strains that someone who's got a problem brings to society.
Diana, I'm sorry I cut across you a little bit then. Would you, did you have anything to add to Penny, Amanda and Alistair's comments on this? Because it's a really interesting question.
I was just going to agree. I mean, I was a criminal legal aid lawyer. I was a duty solicitor until, well, I was still practicing until about 13 years ago, and I left because of legal aid cuts. I just couldn't see how I had a future in it, and I was still practicing as a duty solicitor until about 2 years ago, and then it just became increasingly difficult. And with crime in particular, the rates, I remember I started as a trainee solicitor in 1997. I know, no, I don't look that old. And the rates haven't gone up. In fact, if anything, they've actually gone down. And as Amanda said, you know, the narrative in the media is fat cat lawyers. It's just not true. And I think particularly with crime around the country, duty solicitors, they're all in their 50s and 60s. No one's going into criminal legal aid work because the money is just awful. So I just wanted to talk about my perspective as a former criminal lawyer. That's what I wanted to add.
And I would just chip in as well, the difference as well, forgive me, Diana, but when you and I were studying, we didn't have to pay tuition fees. So we didn't even enter the profession with this burden of debt that our students will carry, and indeed all students carry. So I think that's a further sort of hurdle. I do understand that with the massification of higher education and the numbers of young people going to university, it was unsustainable to fund, but that is a further consequence. But I do think that's an area where law schools such as ours can make a significant contribution to community legal services, because generally our students are keen to work in and for the community from which they hail. They're not driven by wanting to work necessarily in large city law firms earning huge sums of money, but actually gaining confidence and being able to make a difference to someone else's life is really important for them. So, you know, from those points of views, I think that the law schools have got a continuing role to play in building that kind of narrative for students, that they need to make a contribution to local communities. And I'm very fortunate that I'm now the chair of the committee of heads of university law schools in the country. And through that advocacy, I'm using the power to bring together as many of the law schools as I can to try and work in partnership to support each other's law clinics, but also to develop the idea that students should be thinking about working in more community-based legal services, notwithstanding the kind of appalling rates of pay that Diana's alluded to. But it is a very complex problem. And I think, Alistair, you were quite right. You know, it's like an octopus. You can cut off the funding of one tentacle, but it will then still leave a multiplicity of issues and problems, mental health, homelessness, all of which will then become burdens on the public purse, but just a different aspect of the Treasury. It's not very palatable, is it? And if you think as well, add to that, if we didn't have the magistrates, oh my goodness me, the cost of the administration of justice in this country would be beyond what we could afford, I think, even post-pandemic, where we no longer think in millions, but billions and trillions.
Right. I mean, just to sort of follow up on that pandemic, and you did touch upon it a little bit, Penny. I was just wondering how your experience of having to pivot so dramatically, and Amanda mentioned that it was a matter of hours rather than days, that you had to change the way that you operate. Has that led to thoughts going forward as we start to emerge, touch wood, from the pandemic, about how things could be improved in the future? I mean, you mentioned using Zoom, and how does that square off against digital poverty? Because a lot of the people that you're going to be dealing with might not be the ones that can access a Zoom call from a nice comfy part of Hertfordshire than the ones that can't. So how does that circle get squared?
Well, obviously one of the key things, and I'll hand over to Amanda, but the mobile clinic, and now starting to work with the Association of Village Halls, we want to work with organisations that can provide access to computer facilities for those who don't have them, and use those links to build our own mobile clinic facilities. But I'll let Amanda and Diana say more about this. This is my pet project, and they're very kind to me. I think Amanda was being very disingenuous putting a picture of a bicycle up. She knows I will have a whole fleet of bicycles. I won't expect them all to sit on the same bicycle, but And you say about the clinic.
Yes, there'll be tandems, won't they, Penny?
Yes.
But well, no, it's sort of twofold. Obviously, one of the solutions is something like the justice bus, as we like to colloquially call it. But actually, also just going back to the whole idea. I mean, one of the reasons we chose Zoom, obviously, we had to choose it very quickly. But one of the reasons we chose it was because it doesn't need a subscription. You can access it on a telephone, a mobile, on any sort of service at all. You can do it without a video, just through a telephone line if you really have to. It's very easy to do. It doesn't require sort of data to download apps, etc. So that was one of the big reasons behind choosing that over other options we could have had. But also, so we've already obviously started thinking long and hard about bringing us back on campus, and we will definitely have face-to-face law clinics back on campus. My gut reaction is I can't see it happening before January 2022, just because we want to do something and keep it like that, not swapping and changing all the time. But whatever happens now, we will always have some element of a Zoom online facility as well, because some people have actually found it really, really useful. The people who have got childcare, who can't get out of work, who do shift work or something, or incapacitated and can't leave the house, forget the actual government restrictions, but just on day-to-day life would find it really hard to take 2 or 3 hours out of their time to travel to us and actually see us, and then public transport and how to get to us. And also, that's not just the clients, that's the external supervisors, the lawyers who are giving up their time. An hour on a video free of charge is one thing. To actually have a 3 hour out of their day, if they've got to do travel, parking, etc., is entirely different. So we will always have an element of Zoom, and I think all law firms, I think now they've discovered this wonderful new virtual world, are going to hang on to it for a certain element of clients. But no, we appreciate that there are some clients, particularly, for example, we have a power of attorney clinic where we help fill in the forms for people to get power of attorney. That clinic has had, I don't think, a single client since March 2020. It was never our busiest one, but actually we thought we'd have a handful. And it's because that generation who want to fill those forms in don't or can't do it over screen sharing, Zoom, etc. And we get that. So we appreciate that we need to go back to face-to-face. And also from a skill set for the students, learning to interview and interact through a screen. We've all had to do it for last year, so we know how to do it. But actually, it is slightly different doing it face-to-face, seeing the whole body, not just dressing from head to foot, but actually the whole body language and dealing with a client actually there physically in the room with you. There is a different rapport there, and they need to learn both of those skills. But so that's sort of the clinic as a whole. But going on to what Penny said about the justice bus, yes, the more and more projects we're doing is to try and taking us out. So we used to go out to the local domestic abuse clinic in charity, in Hertford, take the students there, because then the clients were safe in the offices of a place where they went for counselling. So we travelled to them. Likewise with the prison service, the idea is that we would go to the prison. With the justice bus, we want to take people out to these rural communities and actually find somewhere they can easily access and easily get to. And one of the discussions we've had is actually, can we even provide laptops and have them available and possibly even leave them with someone secure in the local village hall, town hall, library or whatever, so that people can actually then carry on using the information, the signposting, communicating with us through that sort of community laptop or facility. So there's lots of ways in which hopefully we can make it easier and easier for people to access, whether it be face-to-face or still using the new technology we've now all embraced over the last 12 months.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That blended approach is definitely the way forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think you don't want to lose the things we've gained, but at the same time, there were still good reasons we did it the old way. So I think blended is the way forward.
Yeah, thank you. Lionel, I was going to pick on you and just sort of throw you in, but I'm glad you put your hand up now. You've actually volunteered to speak, so that's good. Instead of me just sort of diving in there. So if you'd like to come in here, that would be lovely.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much indeed. Penny, Diane and Amanda, great presentation, absolutely fantastic, very much. This is an immense Hertfordshire community resource. Thanks for the presentation. I had one question for you, and my colleague, previous High Sheriff Sarah Beasley, when she was in office, I managed to visit one of the Citizens Advice Bureau And I was wondering whether you have a connection with the Citizens Advice Bureau at all, and if you do, what sort of connection is it? Because clearly, this sort of support to our citizens is quite literally, life-saving. I just wondered if you could comment on that for me.
I answered that one. So we work really closely with quite a few Citizens Advice. So in the past, we've sent students to St Albans and to Hertfordshire and to Watford. But I think probably the closest relationship we have is with Stevenage. So we regularly send students there, but also we made a joint application for big lottery funding, which Amanda mentioned. So we've had for the last 6 months a PIP appeals project, which has been, I think, hugely successful. So the funding effectively paid for a member of staff to train and then supervise our students doing PIP appeals. So PIP is personal independence payment, and Stevenage, as we know, is really very, very high levels of deprivation, and so helping really very, very vulnerable people. And as Amanda showed, we have been very successful. So I think we've our students have helped recoup £25,000 of benefits that should have been paid that weren't paid. So yes, I think we work really closely with Stevenage, and we're just hoping we get funding for next year. We had 6 months of funding and it's run out, so we're just hoping that we'll get it extended again from September.
And do you find, just a supplementary question, do you find that the referrals go your way or do they go the other way?
So I mean, it's hard to answer, but I mean, certainly when we opened the clinic, which was October 2019, we publicised it within the Citizens Advice. And I remember certainly the early calls we were getting were mostly being signposted from Citizens Advice over to us. So I'm sure we do signpost the other way as well. But I think Citizens Advice, particularly for family matters, it's not necessarily an area that they can really help with, so they send them to us.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all very much for those really, really fascinating. We've covered so much ground, both in the your talks first of all, and also in the questions and answers. So, that's been really, really good. So, I'm conscious of time. If anyone else has any burning issues, then please feel free to contact Gordon or me, and we'll put you directly in touch, if that's all right. I don't want to take up too much of your evening, but really I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all again, to thank our speakers and all our other participants, our questioners. It's been great to see you all. I'd just like to take this opportunity to raise a glass to toast Her Majesty the Queen, to health of the Queen. And I look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you ever so much for coming. Goodbye for now.
Thank you for having us.
Good night. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.